Hi everyone, this is Ophel. In this video, I will show you how to revert a commit that was done to the code repository that was done in error. This situation actually happened to me, where I committed some work that wasn't mine and I was trying to revert it. It actually is a good use case for rebasing your code and also setting your code or manipulating the code base outside of Studio, because the Studio capabilities are not providing all the options that are available with Git repository manipulation. A quick recap of the first video. In the first video, we've created a repository and we also created an app and a clone. I will use the local clone to do the revert operation. So I encourage you to look at the first video if you want to have a similar setup. To set up the scenario, we'll create a new branch. We're currently on the main branch, and we'll create a new branch called Sprint 2. So all our code will go into Sprint 2. Now let's assume that I'm a developer and I need to put code into an update set. So I'm going to create a new update set, and I'm working on story 0001. So all the code that I'm working on will go into 0001. So now I'm going to make some fictitious updates. I'm going to create a new UI page and also a script include. It's kind of a dummy just to show some sort of work that is done under the story. So now that the script include and the UI page have been created, I will go and assign Anthony to be one of the developers. I'm just going to give him the admin role. So he will work on his set of stories. Now I'm going to impersonate him, and then I'll go to Studio to show you that all the developers that are under the current applications, the SN demo application, are connected to Sprint 2. This is a reminder that whenever we switch to a different branch, all the developers that are connected to the same application will be switched together, which means that all work that is in flight will be stashed. Now, as Anthony Roy, I will create an update set so I can work on my story and make the necessary update. Again, I'm just using a fictitious update to a script include to emulate some work that is done under story 0010. I'll verify that we're under the correct update set and the correct application, and then I'll create a few script includes. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'll create only one script include, and I will initial the script include name with AR for Anthony Roy. So let's assume that Anthony still needs to work on his story and create additional artifacts, but I'm going to end the impersonation and go back to my story to commit my story. And here is where the error is made. So I'm going to go to Studio, and instead of committing my story, I will commit Anthony's story. At this point, I realize that I made an error. Looking at GitHub, I see that I committed Anthony's stories in error. So what I'll need to do is to talk to Anthony and say that I'm going to revert his story back to the sprint. But in the meantime, I will go ahead and commit my story that I intended to commit originally. In GitHub, I see that the latest commit is the commit that I intended to commit. So now I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. And I'm using Visual Studio Code because it's easier for me to issue all the Git commands. We've left the clone as an empty clone, so we need to make a pull to pull everything from the repository back to the main branch. And then what we'll do is we'll check out the Sprint 2 branch. So now we're on the Sprint 2 branch. So now I need to get all the commit IDs for the previous commits. So I'm issuing the log command, and I do get the two IDs, one for the commit that I've created for my story and one for Anthony's story. So all these commands I will document in the comments of this video, so you don't have to remember them. So now I'll issue the revert command. So I'm going to revert Anthony's commit using the ID that I grabbed from the log. Now we have a version of the code without Anthony's commit. So we'll need to create a new commit and add that version to the repository and then continue with the revert operation. In the revert operation, we see this editor page, and what we'll need to do is to accept the version of the comments with the VI editor column WQ exclamation command. Now we need to push the reverted commit back to the code repository. At this point, I'm just going to list the log again to see our new commit without Anthony's commit. Back at the repository, I see that Anthony's story is gone from the update. Back at our repository configuration, we see that the latest commit or the current reference to the latest commit is out of sync with what actually is on the repository. So we'll need to apply remote changes and sync up the repository with ServiceNow because ServiceNow is unaware of the changes that we've done on the clone. This is an important point. Whenever we make changes to the repository, not in Studio, or if the Studio application is getting out of sync with the repo, we always need to apply remote changes. Now we have another problem. We can't see Anthony's updates or script include updates. And when we're trying to commit, there is no option to commit his updates again if he, for example, finished with his work. So after reverting the commit in the code repository, we need to restore Anthony's works in ServiceNow, in Studio. Once the commit is reverted on the Git repo and apply remote changes is done from the instance, both records will go back to the previous version before the changes were made. So each record has an associated history of the version in the sys_update_version table. I will now go to the update versions table and look for our update, and then look for the previous version that Anthony's changes are part of. I'll have to change the scope of the application to global in order to revert to the previous version, which includes Anthony's changes. And then I'll go ahead and revert. Once reverted, I would be able to see it in our application and in Studio. I will switch back to the SN demo application from global, and then I'll go to Studio to ensure that Anthony's commit is still there. And indeed, I can see that I'm able to recommit it again once Anthony's work is done. This concludes our video about reverting commits when dealing with ServiceNow and GitHub integration. Thank you very much.